Hi, I'm Adam Tamburin, and I'm here with Nicole Young, and we just witnessed the execution of Edmund Zagorski, who has been on death row in Tennessee for 34 years. And Nicole and I have both talked about it, and I think one of the things that struck both of us was after this 34-year journey that was capped by this really lengthy and contentious legal battle over lethal injection, a fight that led to the electric chair, it was over in a matter of minutes. So the dichotomy there of this long legal journey leading up to this execution and then the execution's over very quickly really struck us. So, for instance, they opened the curtains to the execution chamber at 7:13. Mr. Zagorski gave his last words, and by 7:17 he was gone. He was pronounced dead at 7:26. Again, that's a matter of 13 minutes from walking in, being strapped in, and giving his last words to being dead. And Nicole, I just really thought that quickness of it all struck me when you look at it in this context of this decades-long legal battle.
I would agree, especially when you consider the fact that these families in recent weeks have expressed to me a little bit of righteous outrage over the fact that their family members had absolutely no say in how they died or how long it took. And one of the main issues in the court documents is why this was a death penalty case was because of the heinous nature of the crime and how long the victims were said to have suffered. The estimates are around 7 minutes, some longer than that, 10 minutes I've heard. And this was over relatively quickly, a matter of 20 seconds the first jolt and 15 seconds the next jolt, and it was over. And there was a lot of really, the family has been really struggling with that, with the fact that it's over so quickly for him, and it really wasn't that way for their loved ones. Just seeing that, it has been really eye-opening for me in this whole process.
Yeah. There's a lot of pain surrounding this case from every angle.
Yes.
And for all of that pain, for all of the emotion that we've heard about in these last days before Mr. Zagorski's death, the execution itself was surprisingly clinical. When the curtain to the execution chamber was raised, we saw Mr. Zagorski with kind of seatbelt-like restraints strapped around him in a an X shape, and then kind of right in his chest. He was strapped down. The warden asked him, "Do you have any last words at this time?" And he gave a very simple, "Let's rock." And then the guards doused his head with salt water, had a big sponge over the top of his head.
The sponge was so big.
And then strapped a shroud that covered all of his face. So for the most part, the emotion that has marked this case for decades wasn't really present. We saw him wave at his defense attorney, make eye contact, smile, appear to raise his eyebrows, looking at his defense attorney, and she did say that she had her hand over her heart because she had told him she wanted him to see that and know that she was holding, I can read the quote, the last thing, or I told him that when I put my hand over my heart, that I was holding him in my heart. So there was emotion, but it was much more subdued, much more focused on the clinical process.
Yes, and I think afterward, during the press conference, she really opened up about things that we were not privy to in the room with him in the cell beforehand, how he told all of them he didn't have any ill will toward them. He told
the guards that, right?
Yes, he did. He told them that he wanted it to be light, the atmosphere to be light, not to be heavy. It was there was emotion, but we really weren't privy to it. I think that was a big takeaway from me. Also, where the witnesses, the family victim witnesses, were supposed to be, I tried to look over in there, but there was reflective glass. I don't know if that's a new thing, Adam.
I'm not sure.
We're both first-time witnesses, so we're not sure. But I didn't see any family members at all during the entire process, which I guess is to be expected. We're not really supposed to see them, but I guess that's just the way that struck out for me, was the fact that it was so clinical, like you said, and devoid of emotion, really. I mean, but I'm saying this, but Kelly Henry had emotion in the room.
Right.
She was wiping away tears during the process. Like, I watched her visibly wipe away tears during the entire process.
But in the execution chamber, the most dramatic things we saw was the warden at 7:13 put his hand over his face, signaling that it was time to start the electric jolts. The electricity didn't make as much of a sound as you might expect.
No.
And then we saw his body tense up and kind of rise up from the chair a little bit. Looked like somebody who's like sitting up really straight, really rigid. And then it would relax when the electricity stopped, and then tense back up when it started again. So it wasn't something that was the emotion was not coming from the execution chamber, that much is true. It'll be interesting to see what happens next with the next execution scheduled in Tennessee, because Ed Zagorski chose the electric chair because he thought it would be faster. It's 30 seconds, 35 seconds of an electric jolt versus several minutes with a lethal injection. It can last as long as 18 minutes. And the inmates have sued and said that's going to be a really painful time for them. So that's why Ed Zagorski picked it. It'll be interesting to see if other inmates follow suit and pick the electric chair as well.
Yes, and there are many convicted inmates on death row that do have that option. Anyone who was sentenced to death prior to 1999 has the option of opting into the electric chair over lethal injection protocol. So it will be interesting, like you said, to see what happens next with that. And I wanted to just kind of ask you, do you know anything about the next execution at David Earl Miller?
So David Earl Miller is scheduled to die on December 6th. This is a crime out of Knoxville. And I have reached out to his attorneys and haven't heard back about his decision. And it remains to be seen whether or not he'll follow Mr. Zagorski's lead and request the electric chair.
And I mean, I would like to note as well that this was the first time that we have had a death sentence carried out on the books in Robertson County, dating back to the beginnings of record keeping for the state of Tennessee. We have some cases prior to 1926, I believe, is when the record started. Am I right, Adam?
I'm not sure about that one. You're
It
the
feels
expert
right.
there. Yeah.
It feels right, but it was in the early 1900s when they started keeping records. We have some examples on the books in the county that they were in the 1800s, late 1800s, and they were hangings. But then when the state decided to move forward with electric chair deaths and protocols of that nature, this is actually the first one for Robertson County.
I know, and for that family, it's the closing of a chapter, but certainly a lot of pain still lingers there.
And it doesn't bring them back, you know that. But at least they have a little bit of closure now after such a protracted legal battle. I know the nephew of John Dale Dotson relayed to me in conversations that he had read all 22 of Edmund Zagorski's appeals over the years, just read all of them. So I think for them, the fact that it's over speaks volumes.
We're going to be continuing to cover this case and future executions in Tennessee at Tennessean.com. We're going to have a lot of coverage coming, following up on Edmund Zagorski's death sentence, and then going into the next scheduled execution on December 6th. So you can check it out at Tennessean.com.